The village of Hanamura had a rule that every child absorbed before they were old enough to question it. Never answer the door after dark. Not because of anything as ordinary as thieves or danger, but because of what old Matsuda had seen 30 years ago at the edge of his porch light, standing perfectly still in the November fog, smiling in a way that made him sell the house by morning and never speak of that street again. It was the kind of rule that lived in the bones rather than the mind, passed down not through warning, but through the particular silence adults fell into whenever the subject approached too closely. Kenji was 11, and 11-year-olds have a particular talent for dismissing the fears of people who are no longer young. His parents had left for the city that Tuesday evening, his mother's hospital appointment running late into the night, and for the first time in his life, Kenji had the house entirely to himself. It felt, in those early hours, less like abandonment and more like promotion. He warmed rice on the stove, left the television running at a volume that filled every corner, and settled into the specific comfort of a child who has decided he is nearly an adult. The wind came up around 8, rattling the kitchen shutters with an irregular rhythm that he told himself was just weather doing what weather does. He was almost convinced when the knocking came, 2 quiet, measured strikes against the front door, spaced with a patience that had nothing hurried in it. He turned the volume down and waited, the way you wait when you're hoping a sound will explain itself. It did not explain itself. The silence stretched long enough that his shoulders dropped and his breath returned to normal, and he was reaching for the rice when it came again. 2 knocks, identical in pressure and spacing to the first, as though produced not by a fist, but by something calibrated, something that had rehearsed this particular rhythm across a very long stretch of time. Kenji pressed his eye to the peephole without thinking, because curiosity is faster than fear in children. What he saw at the edge of the porch light made curiosity evacuate immediately. A woman stood at the bottom of the steps, tall in a way that registered as wrong before his mind had finished processing the image, wearing a dark coat that reached her ankles despite the fact that no one had forecast rain. Her hair hung forward in a dense curtain that swallowed the light rather than reflecting it, and she was not looking at the door. She was looking slightly beside it, at the precise section of wall behind which Kenji was standing, with the calm confidence of someone who had already located what they came for. His heel scraped the hallway rug as he stepped back. A small sound, almost nothing, but her head turned toward it with a slowness so deliberate it seemed practiced, the movement of something that had studied how necks work and was applying the knowledge carefully. Her hands hung at her sides with the fingers curled slightly inward, too long by a measurement he couldn't name but couldn't ignore. When she knocked a 3rd time, the pattern had changed. 3 knocks now, the rhythm shifting the way a conversation shifts when small talk is finished. Kenji's phone sat on the kitchen counter, which meant crossing the hallway, which meant passing within 2 feet of that door. He understood in his body, before he understood it in his mind, that this was something he was not going to do. He stood in the blue television light and breathed carefully and listened to the silence outside, which had a weight to it that ordinary silence does not carry. The weight of something with patience so deep it has stopped needing to perform impatience. Then her voice came through the wood. "I only want to ask you something," she said, and the Japanese she spoke was shaped by a time so far back it felt less like language and more like an impression left in the air by language. vowels formed by a mouth that had learned them from people centuries dead. He said nothing. He flattened himself against the far wall and waited with every muscle locked. And after a long time, long enough that hope began assembling itself from the silence, the peephole went dark, not with the passing of a shadow, but all at once, completely, the way a candle dies. He understood that she was pressed against the door now, with her eye against the glass, looking into the same space he had been looking out of minutes before. The humming started then, low and unhurried, a lullaby pulled from somewhere older than the house, older than the village, possibly older than the concept of lullabies being meant to comfort. It was the warmth in her voice that undid him most, that almost human, almost gentle quality that suggested she had been practicing this too, for a very long time, on a very long list of doors. Kenji's parents found him at 11:30, every light burning, the television still talking to an empty room, their son pressed into the far corner of the living room with his knees at his chest and his eyes fixed on the front door with an expression they had no language for and never found one. He didn't tell them what she had asked him in those final minutes before the humming stopped and the porch light came back on and the night went ordinary again. He didn't tell anyone, but he never again stood near a door after dark without checking, first, that the peephole was showing him light,